Today we're tackling a topic that's everywhere: artificial sweeteners. I want to get into the real story about how they might affect your heart. I've discovered some really interesting studies, and my goal today is to cut through the noise and see what the science actually says about sugar substitutes and cardiovascular health. Let's start with a bit of context. For the longest time, fat was the villain in heart disease. That was the main focus, stemming from researchers like Ansel Keys in the mid-20th century. Cut the saturated fat, cut the cholesterol, the whole butter and egg thing. But even back then, there were other ideas floating around. A British scientist, John Yudkin, was looking at sugar as far back as 1957. His work suggested that higher sugar consumption might actually be linked to higher death from coronary heart disease than fat was. So why don't we hear more about that? The sugar industry, it seems, wasn't too keen on that idea. Money talks, as they say. We now know the Sugar Research Foundation actually funded some Harvard researchers back in the 1960s to write a literature review that ended up downplaying the risks associated with sugar and pointing the finger firmly back at saturated fat and cholesterol. Now, that study didn't disclose its funding properly. That report came out in '67, and it had a huge influence on dietary guidelines for decades. Fat became public enemy number one, and sugar kind of got a pass, relatively speaking. But things didn't really improve. We moved into the 80s and 90s, and low fat was everywhere. But obesity rates kept climbing. Type 2 diabetes rates went up. Heart disease was still a massive problem. So researchers started thinking maybe we needed to look at sugar again. And when they did, the findings were pretty stark. There was a major 15-year study published in 2014 that showed a clear link between added sugar intake and the risk of dying from heart disease. Importantly, it was a dose-response relationship, meaning the more sugar you ate, the worse it was. Sugary drinks like soda and juice were a big factor highlighted in that study. Regular consumption was linked strongly to more heart attacks and strokes. This brings us to artificial sweeteners, the supposed solution to our sugar problem. Saccharin was discovered way back in 1879, but these products really took off in the later 20th century. Remember those little pink Sweet and Low packets? And then came cyclamate, followed by aspartame, sold as Equal and NutraSweet. Then sucralose hit the market as Splenda. The 80s were really the explosion point with the diet craze sweeping America. Diet Coke launched in '82, and suddenly sugar-free was everywhere. The marketing was brilliant. All the taste, none of the guilt. Have the sweet without the calories. Doctors initially saw them as a useful tool to help patients cut sugar and manage weight. The idea was that they were metabolically inert, just sweet taste, no impact on the body. That was the promise, and people naturally bought this story. The numbers are pretty striking. In the USA, estimates suggest consumption went from maybe 70 million people in 1987 to around 160 million by the year 2000, so like half the country using artificial sweeteners. But the thing is, obesity went up too. Obesity rates in the US basically doubled from around 15 to 30% during the time artificial sweetener use was skyrocketing. This became known as the diet soda paradox. Researchers noticed people who drank a lot of diet soda weren't necessarily slimmer. Sometimes the opposite was true. Studies showed higher rates of obesity and metabolic syndrome among heavy users. For those unfamiliar, metabolic syndrome is a cluster of conditions: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and extra fat around the waist. Together, they significantly increase your risk for heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. The 2007 Framingham Heart Study found that both diet and regular soda consumption was linked to a 48% higher risk of developing metabolic syndrome over the 4 years they followed people. Other studies, like the San Antonio Heart Study, found that people using artificial sweeteners gained more weight over 8 years. So why would zero-calorie sweeteners increase weight gain and metabolic issues? Several theories exist. One major idea is metabolic miscommunication. Our bodies evolved to associate sweet taste with incoming calories. So when artificial sweeteners provides that sweet signal without calories, your body gets confused. It's like hearing a fire alarm but there's no fire. Eventually the system might stop responding appropriately. This was demonstrated in fascinating rat studies where animals eating saccharin-sweetened yogurt ended up eating more food overall, gaining more weight than the sugar-fed rats, despite consuming fewer calories from the yogurt itself. Hormones play a crucial role too. Even without calories, the sweet taste can trigger insulin release. If no sugar arrives after that insulin release, your blood sugar might drop, making you hungrier. Some sweeteners can even increase your insulin response to real sugar consumed later, creating a cycle of metabolic confusion. Brain chemistry is another factor. Sweet taste triggers dopamine release in reward centers, but artificial sweeteners may not satisfy this pathway completely. You get the sweetness, but not the full reward, potentially driving continued cravings and seeking even sweeter foods. Likewise, new research directly links artificial sweeteners to heart disease. The French Nutrinet Santé study followed over 100,000 adults for about a decade. High artificial sweetener consumption was associated with a 9% higher risk of cardiovascular disease overall, and an 18% higher risk of stroke specifically. Different sweeteners showed different patterns. Aspartame was linked to a 17% greater stroke risk, while acesulfame K users had around a 40% higher risk of coronary heart events. These aren't negligible numbers at all. So how might sweeteners increase heart risk? Several pathways in fact. The gut microbiome is a major factor. A pivotal 2014 study in Nature showed that artificial sweeteners can alter gut bacteria in ways that worsen blood sugar control in both mice and humans. These microbiome changes can promote inflammation and contribute to artery hardening. Another factor is the health halo effect. Someone might think, I'm having a diet soda, so I can eat those fries too. This leads to poorer overall dietary choices. Likewise, artificial sweeteners are usually consumed in ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, make up over half the calories for the average American diet. A landmark NIH study had people eat either ultra-processed or unprocessed diets matched for nutrients. On the UPF diet, people automatically ate 500 more calories daily and gained weight. On the other hand, the unprocessed diet led to weight loss. Something about UPFs drives overconsumption, regardless of calorie content. Similarly, the Framingham Offspring study found each extra daily serving of UPFs increased heart attack and stroke risk by 7%. This all suggests we've been focusing too narrowly. First it was cut all fat, then cut all sugar. But maybe the real issue is processing itself. We've replaced butter with margarine, then sugar with artificial sweeteners in highly processed foods. Neither swap was optimal. Perhaps we should focus less on substitutes and more on eating real, whole foods. For the most powerful whole foods, watch our video on the top 10 superfoods for your heart. Click the like button if you found this video helpful, and click subscribe to see more videos as we release them.